I'm going to call the December 2nd, 2021 meeting of the Guidelines Subcommittee to order. Can I get a roll call? I'm going to just go through here. Parasha Patel here. Chris?
Here.
Mary?
Here.
Emrith?
Here.
Dee?
Here.
Brian?
Here.
John?
Here.
Eric?
Yeah.
Kathy?
Here.
Lois? Okay, you're muted, but we have a quorum. So thank you, everybody.
Sorry.
So I think we've got, that's okay. We have a couple agenda items today. We've got the Minuteman team here to present their fiscal year 23 budget provided as information. And then we've got Stephen and Carrie here to talk about the town's preliminary budget, the way it stands now. We'll have discussion on both throughout, and then we'll quickly review the calendar for upcoming meetings. Let me turn it over to Rich and to Stephen. First of all, thank you for sharing the presentation well in advance. We appreciate it. I think most members have had an opportunity to review the presentation and the information you provided. If you can limit your presentation to about 25 minutes, that would be great, including discussion. Rich or Stephen, which one of you guys do you want to kick it off?
Let me just kick it off.
Great.
And I hear you on your stand that you want it quick and dirty. Hopefully it'll be quick, but not dirty. I'm Steve Ledoux. I am the Concord rep to the Minuteman School Committee. I've been on the committee and I'm in my third year. I'm currently the vice chair of the school committee and chair of the finance subcommittee. And I just wanted to bring your attention to a few things that aren't in the presentation. Then I'm going to turn it over to Rich to make the presentation. But for those of you who don't know, our superintendent, Ed Quillen, will be retiring the end of June. So we are now in the throes of an executive search for the school committee. The screening committee will be interviewing candidates this December. School committee will be interviewing finalists in January with the hope of offering and having someone accept the position by the end of January with the start of July 1 of 2022. As Rich will go through the presentation, we're going through what I would call an enrollment challenge because the school was not built to the size we really need. We are not being able to accept a lot of out of district students right now. And that's very important because out of district tuition is used to offset our assessments. So enrollment's a big issue for us. And we recently, a few weeks ago, had an open house for 8th graders. 41 8th grade students from Concord attended the open house. In a little survey after the open house, 20 of them said they definitely were going to apply. About 18 were still thinking about it. So, you know, there could be another impact on Concord as well. Also, we just finished our playing fields project, and the fall sports were able to play on the fields this year for the first time, I think, in 4 or 5 years. And finally, one of the issues that I know we've talked about before and the select board has talked about is some concern about what we're doing about our OPEB liability. And I was able to convince the school committee to appoint a OPEB study committee, of which I'm a member. We also have Sandy Pooler, the finance director for the town of Arlington, on this committee, Rich, the district treasurer, and Jim Gamble, who's a former school committee member that's very, very knowledgeable about OPEB. And we're having our first meeting next week, and our goal is to set up a strategy of how to fund OPEB moving forward. So that's the remarks I wanted to make, and I'll turn it over to Rich for his presentation.
Stephen, thank you very much. So those are perfect highlights, and appreciate the big picture perspective in the search, as well as the good news on the OPEB study. So thank you. Rich, floor is yours.
Steve said everything I wanted to say, so we're done. Thank you very much. Appreciate it.
Have a good night.
I'm Rich Eichenen. I am the Assistant Superintendent of Operations and Facilities. I've been with the school for about 2.5 years now. Dr. Boquin was unable to help us be with us tonight, so he asked me to sit in. So I will be as quick as possible because I know you're pressed for time. I'm going to jump right to slide 4 inside of the
Are you
FY20.
going to share the screen, Rich, or do you want me to pull it up?
I can do either way.
Why don't you go ahead and pull it up since
Okay.
you'll drive the slides.
All right, let me give me a minute. I gotta pull
Yeah,
it up.
also there's no slide number, so it's hard for us to know which one you mean by slide 4 or 5.
Not a problem. I appreciate that. I just gotta find it on my computer now. I'm not using my work computer, so I apologize.
I can,
I just needed to find it, that's all.
Rich, I've got it up if you want to just.
Okay,
tell
all right.
me what to do here. Page
Well,
4.
Okay, Brian, that's yours. Great. Let's go. Yep.
All right, so if you can go down to the FY21, FY22 budget update, and I will start there. So here is our FY21 results from what our projected budget was versus actual. You're going to note some things like our Chapter 70 aid was decreased by $30,000. Again, our FY21 budget is what we projected. That's what we expected. And our FY21 is $30,350, $52 short. And that's exactly what we got from the state. Chapter 71 regional transportation reimbursement. Again, because of the hybrid model that we were under, we had actual cost of transportation was decreased, or that the number of, the transportation was decreased, so our cost decreased, so our reimbursements decreased. You'll see under miscellaneous, $300,000 approximately. That is a number of things ranging from teachers who get paid in the summertime, the 4 pay periods that they elect to get paid past the June 30th deadline or June 30th end of year, as well as some prior cleanup of expenses that were under grants that were now covered, expenses to the district and now are covered by grants, reimbursement from Eversource for overpayment in a previous year, those types of items that really come from FY 2021 that need to be recognized as revenue in FY21. So, and the salary difference is due to the reduction of employees. There were a number of teachers that left due to the COVID. Some of them were not needed. Some were due to retirement as well, or just left the profession due to the pandemic. And there was also a number of aides that were let go because they were not going to be needed for the hybrid model. So again, the next slide, and this is where don't switch slides yet because I'm going to talk to FY22 because for some reason the slide didn't make it to you in the transition. So in FY22, we had a 2.5% increase in the budget, which 2.5% plus 2.25% plus steps and lanes was approximately $313,629. We also had some budget drivers of electrical increase from the new building, as well as electrical heat, as in basically the utilities went up somewhere between 40 to 80% over previous year. And we're working on that to really get that under control and so forth. I can tell you that we're not projecting an increase similar to that for a next year. Insurance went up, health insurance went up as annually. And then our operating savings for that year, for FY22, were due to this decrease in staffing. We had 5 full-time employees leave. So that was a 7% reduction in health insurance, or approximately $182,000. Our FY, if we can go to, stop me. Like I said, I know you're pressed for time. So the FY, if you want to go to spending and service, the next one. Slide 7 is FY23, the budget drivers. Again, CBA dictates that we have a 2% increase in steps and lanes. We are hiring additional 5 full-time employees between support staff, vocational instructors and academics instructors. We're predicting a health insurance of 9%, transportation of 9%, budget, building utilities. Like I said, we've leveled off to a certain extent, so we're only doing a 12% increase. The debt service payments are leveling off. The biggest concern that we've had over is the increase in supplies and for costs and materials, and specifically in our CTE budgets. We're seeing an average of 10 to 15% increase on materials needed to teach our trades, specifically in the construction trades, carpentry, electrical, plumbing, advanced manufacturing, and welding and metal fabrication. This is due to the labor shortage, the supply chain issues and so forth. We're hoping to see that this will level off, if not remedy itself within the next 6 months. Next slide. The school-wide goals. Again, you've seen these in the past. These are not new. These are still our focus, our main focus, and it's because we have the academy model. As you may or may not know, our building was designed around the academy model. We have schools within schools, and what that means is that our students, the trades and the academics are all that are associated with the academics that are associated with those trades are in one side of the building, and the other side is associated with the other side of the other trades. So what that does is that promotes ability for our students to stay with a core group of teachers throughout their entire 9 through 12 careers, which promotes, a more personalized and supportive learning environment. It aims to help the students build stronger relationships with peers and teachers. It also helps us integrate a rigorous academic courses with the vocational courses that we offer. This promotes the academies promote partnerships with local employers, electricians, plumbers, carpenters, auto tech, auto shops and so forth. It also strengthens the school and the work relationships within our sending districts, as well as, outside of our sending districts, because not all our districts are going to be able to support the placement of our students. So we do go to, and I'll use Waltham because it's the closest one to our school. We have students that will go to Waltham to work in co-op or intern abilities. So the other characteristic of Academy is it builds strong working relationships with teachers, associated business partners, students, and parents. Again, these students are with the same teachers and vocational instructors for 4 years. So I've been in vocational education now for 16 years, and what it really means for these students is that they create family units inside the shops. And what I'm most impressed with is that really translates into the academic side as well, because you're going to go outside the shop, you're going to go upstairs, and you're going to be with the same teachers you've had for 4 years as well. So you get to know those teachers, get to know those students, they get to know the idiosyncrasies, they know when there's an issue going on, and can identify it and really work with those students and address any issues that may or may not arise in those 4 years. It really is a different model than a regular vocational school, which I came from in my area in Central Mass, where all the academics were in one area and all the shops were in one area, and you just, you took classes based on what you wanted. But I think this is much more effective for our students. Again, our next slide, please. The high school CTE programs, I'm not going to go through them all, but you can see the two academies. engineering construction, which is broken down into two other pathways: communications, media, and trades and transportation, and then an engineering and production. And then you have the life science and service academies, which is broken down into the agricultural, environmental, and life science pathway, as well as the health, hospitality, and human services pathway. Just some examples of these are on the engineering, construction trade side are design and visual communications, carpentry, electrical, advanced manufacturing, metal fab and welding, robotics, and automation. On the life science side, you're going to see animal science, biotech, environmental science, horticulture, Cosmo, health assisting, culinary arts. What we're doing now is that we're looking at the following. While we have welding, metal fab, we have such a demand. We're going to talk about this in a few slides, but the capacity building project, or a capacity expansion project, and what that does is really addresses the need that we're seeing in welding, metal fab. We've actually doubled the amount of freshmen this year from last year, and that really puts a pressure on that, because while our junior class is small and our freshman class is large, if we see that the trend is going to continue building over the next several years, so we're going to need a bigger space for that shop. The animal science, we launched that this year. We are holding those classes in a combination of a classroom as well as some science classes. So they're going to get their lab aspect of it, as well as their academic part of that, or just a classroom setting inside the building. We can do that for 2 years, and then we're going to run into an issue. Logistics, automation, engineering. We have a warehouse that has a vertical lift machine in it, which basically is like a small Amazon picking machine. It is an automated system, like I said, and it allows you to store multiple things up to 25 feet in the air inside this unit that you press, I want tray 4, item 5, and it goes up, pulls down the item, tray 4, brings it down to you. You can pick up item 4 out of it, or item 5 out of it. And you can have, I think there's 32 different trays on there, and they can hold anything from pencils and paper up to a small block engine, to be honest with you, because it's 1,500 pounds on the largest unit. So that's kind of exciting. Unfortunately, we're having a hard time trying to find a teacher for that program. So we're still hoping to get that filled for next year and offer that program. But right now, animal science is in place, and welding, metal fab has been in place for a number of years. Next, can we go to capital spending plans? Athletic fields. I'm very excited to say that we're approaching the finish line, to coin a term. We have our main our stadium field, which is a multi-purpose field that has soccer, lacrosse, football on it, as well as a full track and field establishment around the outside of it. Our baseball field, multi-purpose field, is approaching completion. They're finalizing the infill on that, and they're going to start working on our multi-purpose softball field, which should be done by the end of the month. Really excited about this. I mean, I wish I had to put a slide in this to show you what we've got so far. It's beautiful. We've had our first home games in 5 years, so we're very excited about these fields in the area. And we just can't wait for the spring, because then we can start doing other things as well. As you can see, that we're pretty conservative with the stabilization fund that we're gonna be able to allocate every year, 168,000. This is the lowest we want to predict, because this 168,000 over 10 years will be the cost to replace the fields. The life expectancy of a turf field is approximately 10 years. So we're looking at having that money in our coffers at that point to replace that, these fields at that time. So but we're still, again, this is a conservative estimate. And to be honest with you, what I'm seeing, I'm in the coin a term from Field of Dreams. If you build it, they will come. We have tremendous interest in utilizing our fields, not only in our building and for our students, but outside for potential rental abilities. So we're very excited about that. The next piece of it is, the next slide is going to be the photovoltaic. And this, happy to say, is completed. It started in January with things going on, and it's completed in September. This will offer approximately 20%, a little more than 20% savings on an annual basis. And it'll help us out in a great deal. Again, as you can see, the secures a lead reimbursement of $2 million. The application for lead endorsement has been submitted. We are just going back and forth right now. They had a couple of questions, so we're discussing those questions, and once that's done, we should get to $2 million from MSBA. So that'll go a long way to helping us out pay for the building.
Rich, you've got about 10 minutes left. Do you want to spend a little bit of time talking about the enrollment
Yeah,
topic?
I'm going to get to that, sir. It's just next ones. I'm gonna go real quick over the next couple of slides so I can get to enrollment. As you can see, the stabilization balance is 2.2 million. We're going to use 1.25 to go towards the athletic fields. We're going to use the surplus or some monies other than that, what's left over, to use for our capacity building projects. And we intend on putting, a small amount of money, approximately $500,000 into the capitalization fund. The enrollment, I'll get to the enrollment now. So the biggest thing is that we're going to an in-district model for enrollment. So our 9 towns are going to be predominantly filling our building, which is a good thing for all of us as a member town, but it also shows that, it's also going to show display a decrease in out of district enrollment, which has which brings out of district tuition, which is far larger than what Chapter 70 and assessments would bring. It also will be decreasing the non-residential capital fee, because we can't charge that for internally, because we already agreed to pay for our school. The resulting is that we're going to have a significant increase in assessments of the towns, but the per pupil cost will go down. The next couple slides are just demographics. You're going to see that we have 655 right now. We were at 538 member towns and 117 non-member towns. That 117 is going to decrease dramatically over the next 2 years. Our senior and junior class, after they graduate in 23, I'm sorry, we'll only have a handful of out of district or non-member towns students still left in the building. So understand the effect of that will have on us. The next slide, you can see the 4-year graduate, the 4 classes we have in the building right now. We have 655. Concord has 33 students. We had an increase of 12 to 12 students. We had been around 25, holding steady around 25 for the last 3 years. And that extra 7 students enrolled this year will bring us up to 33 students. And as you can see, our special ed still is above the state average. We're at 47%. We are the highest in the state right now. Second is Brockton, and I think it's Brockton. I think that's what I was told. But next slide. Again, out of district tuition is saved by DESE. This year it's $18,679. The non-resident sped fee is $6,100. The capital fee is based on the average pupil cost of the debt service, which is only attributed to the new building. Transportation for our non-member students are paid by the town. The next slide, please. The capital fee for non-members. These are cities who have the ability to have 5 or less Chapter 74 programs. So those districts who only have offerings of either Minuteman, only have internal offerings in their comprehensive school, have a cost of $7,467. Those districts that have 5 or more Chapter 74 programs, so like a Bill Ricker or a Bedford who has Shawsheen and they elect to come to Minuteman, is only $5,600. The revenue collected offsets the debt. Next slide is the assessments. Again, this is based on FY21 numbers. And obviously this is the overall budget divided by operating assessment divided by the October 1 number, enrollment number. As you all know, the October 1 number in education is what our funding for the subsequent year is based on. So that number is key for a lot of different calculations. So this is pretty standard, steady for what you saw last year as well. Next slide, the education reform and mandates. We don't see any financial impact to any of our sending districts going forward. And I will turn over the OPEB to Steve.
Well, I know what else to say about OPEB and what we've already said. You know, we have not really put much money in this. As you can see, only 478,000. Our OPEB study committee will have our first meeting on Tuesday, this coming Tuesday. And we'll be looking, we just got our recent OPEB study done where we're going to be meeting with the consultants. It's a variety of issues we're going to explore, including, as many of you know, 7 towns pulled out of Minuteman. And we're going to be discussing with council and maybe have to hire special counsel to see, is there any obligation on the part of those communities that pulled out in terms of OPEB? I mean, obviously a lot of the staffing, et cetera, was put in place because of those 7 towns, and do they have any obligation to help fund our OPEB costs? So that we're going to be looking at a variety of things. Our goal is to have a strategy put together in maybe a month or 2, and then move forward and start being a little more aggressive on how we fund it. So we'll see. Like I said, our first meeting is next Tuesday, so we'll be charting a course after that meeting.
Thank you, Rich and Stephen. One comment and then one question. When you get a chance, can you send us the complete deck that shows the numbers for fiscal year 2022 as well as the 23 projected or estimated budget as you're pulling that together?
Absolutely. I mean, we're still in the really early stages of the FY23 budget, but
yeah, I understand. I think it would be helpful just for us to get a sense of how our overall town numbers are shaping up, and then and directly related to that is, do you have a sense right now of what Concord's fiscal year 23 assessment is and the change relative to the 2022 assessment?
If I might just interject, our finance subcommittee will be looking at the first iteration of the superintendent's budget this coming Monday night. And I'm sure there'll be a lot of changes. We have to approve a budget. The school committee has to approve a budget 90 days before the first member town's town meeting, which is Lexington, and it's sometime last week or so of March. So, the finance subcommittee really hasn't seen any of the numbers yet. We'll be looking at them Monday night.
Okay, yeah, and so as soon as you can share, Stephen, that would be great. Just again, helps for our planning purposes. Thank you. Let me open it up and see if folks have questions. I see Chris's hands raised and Dee. Chris, you want to go ahead? And then I see Dean.
Sure, thank you. So the enrollment, so you're looking to build another building to get you up to 800. Is that the plan?
Well, it wouldn't be necessarily a new building. the district owns some buildings on Mill Street, which is right off of 2A, a little before the campus. There's some commercial office buildings there. A lot of the plan would be to rehab some of those buildings, a lot with student labor, and utilize what we have. So it wouldn't necessarily be new construction.
Okay, and your stabilization reserve, so there's money coming in from LEAD, you had some money left over from the project that was being used for the fields. And you feel you have enough money left over to do this rehabbing to get you what you need to the 800 enrollment? That's where the money's going to come from, in other words. Is that right? Yeah.
Yes.
We are, if I may, I'm gonna build off what Steve said. There is one construction going to happen that we're out to bid on right now. It's called the North Building because it's on the north side of the building. And I kind of alluded to the issue we're having in welding and metal fab. We doubled in size and we have some very big machines and so forth that have to be utilized. So we are building an approximately 5,000 square foot building that, well, we want to build. And that is on that slide, I didn't reference to, and I apologize, I was going quick. Approximately $700,000 of that remaining monies in the stabilization fund will be utilized to build that steel structure. And it'll be, the steel structure will be constructed and the students will be doing a fair amount of the HVAC, plumbing and heating and HVAC is electrical. So they'll be doing a fair amount of that. And we're hoping to have that open in FY23. That hopefully it's built by mid-May, early June, and then we can have the students come in and finish it. There is a building on the east side of campus called the Tremont School Building that was utilized in a number of different ways. There was a time where Lincoln Labs had it in as a daycare center, and then Tremont School came in and turned it into a school for early child development. They pulled out about 4 years ago now. That is the building that Dr. Boquillan in the district is referring to be utilized for the animal science program. We are trying to work with a industry partner that may help us outfit that building and do any renovations, but we're still in the preliminary stages with that. So when that slide says planning in progress, that's where we're at right now with that.
Okay. So from a fiscal perspective, Steve, if they get up to 800 in terms of enrollment, understanding that that's mostly going to be in district enrollment, is that going to how is that going to affect our assessment?
Well, once again, it depends, obviously, how many kids from Concord. I mean, part of the hope of going up to 800 is we do get some more tuition students. That's kind of the kind of part of the impetus of the whole thing. So, I mean, that's kind of the, we should have had an 800 student school to start with. So, we're just going to basically get to where we should have been and hopefully have some in-district students. And that can help offset a lot of the assessments.
Okay, so the hope is that building will help bring assessments down from member towns.
Absolutely.
Okay.
But if I can just interject, just remember that the Chapter 70 funding is based on a number of things, including minimum required contribution by the town.
Yeah.
And it's based on, that minimum contribution is based on tax rate and income of the town. So
Right.
that's where you get hit.
Yes, that's right.
So I just want to make sure everyone understands that.
I do,
before-
right.
Equal.
I do, but if there's more towns to play it over, it helps us, so.
Correct.
Yeah.
But the
And,
more students that a particular town has, the
Right.
higher.
Okay, thank you. So Steve, there was also a big push there on revenue. So we were going to put lights up if we could, so we could rent fields. There's also the postgraduate program that they were looking at for revenue. So I'm just curious how your revenues, are they coming in the way you wanted? And is that something that helps assessments, or is that something that feeds the stabilization reserve? Where do those revenues go?
Well, I think it's a little early I mean, when we talked about the lights in the fields, I mean, we clearly have some projections, but we haven't really rented any field use out yet, so it's a little hard to totally project that. I can let Rich talk about that a little more because I haven't really seen any of the 2023 numbers that might project some of those revenues.
Thank you. We are very optimistic that our facility usage rental revenues will exceed that 168 that we talked about. I hired a person who works for me directly that will handle facility rentals exclusively. And she is getting calls, 3 or 4 calls a day on when our things are going to be available, what are the rates and so forth. We are right now in the process of finalizing our policy for our new policy for rentals. And once that happens, we will be given a green light to do that. We've had small rental agreements under the old policy, but we are working on a new one. Hopefully that's completed by end of Q1 in 22. And if any indication of what we're seeing, I've got a couple organizations that are ready to do multiple, to sign a check tomorrow just to get on our field. So that remember, it's just not the fields, it's our building as well. We're going to try to utilize our conference centers, our gymnasium, our theater, anything we possibly can, but we also have to be cognizant of our student needs, and that comes first, obviously, because we never want to put our student education activities, enrichment programs at risk for simple monies. It just wouldn't make any sense. We're in the business of being educators, but we know that this is very important to everybody, and this is a goal of ours to continue in this positive direction that we're seeing right now.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks, Rich. Dee?
Yeah, thank you. Rich, I have just a couple of quick questions for you. Right now, the capacity is 628 students. Now, with the extension on the one building and these other buildings that you're finding, do you have to go back to the state to have them authorize the number of students that you can have in these other structures?
No, because what we're doing is we're building within the capacity set forth by the regulations for those shops. So every shop has a different per square footage per student. So we can't exceed that. We will go back and we already have approval for the animal science program. So we know that we're going to approximately have 20 students per year. So that's an additional 80 students. We know that when we go into the lab, that lab and the classrooms around that will have to meet that demand for students. The 5,000 square foot building that we're going to add on to the north side of the building meets the a class of 12 to 15 students, so that we're well within our capabilities. But we will notify them, and I am sure that I will have a visit from the Department of Education to come in and make sure that we're all within standards of what they expect.
Yes. Okay. My other question is pertains to slide 18, and you were saying that the non-included schools that send students, they only pay debt service on the new building. So in that regard, I'm thinking you have debt service on still existing on the former building.
Well, we have a lease called an ESCO lease that was on the old building, and Rich can provide more information. That was mainly for, if I recall correctly, heating. All the renegade towns that pulled out are paying their portion of that ESCO lease back to us, and I think that's through 2025, Rich. I think if memory serves me,
it is, and that money. I mean, that, like Steve said, that ESCO lease will be up in 2025, and
okay, and that's on the old building.
Yes,
correct. That was a chapter 25, a chapter 7 chapter 25 program for do building, outfit the building or retrofit the building
Okay.
for environmental improvements.
Good.
Or
All right, thank you.
efficiency. Yep.
Thanks, Dean. Dean?
Yeah, thanks. I'm kind of focused at the moment on your solar arrays, which you have completed. So that's good news. You say that you're saving 20% on your energy cost, your electric bill. How much of your electricity is provided by the arrays that you put up? That's my first question. Do you have any idea what
0.
percentage of the electricity that you are receiving from your solar arrays?
That's the interesting thing. Our solar panels are not owned by us. They're
It's a
owned by,
power purchase agreement.
correct.
Power
So
purchase agreement.
we have credit based on that power purchase agreement. That's where the
Okay.
20% will come in.
So-
We don't have any direct numbers. I mean,
So that gets to my second question.
Yep.
You have a lease purchase arrangement. So you have a power purchase agreement for 20 years. You'll be buying power from the owners. At the end of that, do you own the arrays and the electricity is now yours? Is that the way that works?
that is my understanding. I just was not, I was not part of the program, but that is my understanding as I've been told. Yes.
The reason I'm asking these questions is we're up against it for a new school we're building here in Concord, and the town needs to put solar on that building, and a power purchase arrangement is one opportunity. Was there a large funding requirement at the front end of that you had to pony up, or did the organization that you're buying the power from, are those the folks who put up the capital for that?
The person that, I mean, the company that we're purchasing the power from
Okay.
did the install.
Okay, that's just information for me, because we're in the process of
Yep.
sorting that out ourselves over here in Concord. Is how are
If
we
you have
gonna?
any further questions, I mean, you can always give me a call and I can share more detail about it.
Thanks, that would be fantastic. Thanks. Well, our light plant here is organizing that right now. That's something that they're studying, and it's an integral part of putting together this new building that we're on. So thank you for that. Appreciate it.
Thanks, Dean. Kathy?
Get myself off mute. My questions are around the towns leaving. So you have some towns leaving the partnership. Yet I'm hearing that you're at capacity in terms of facilities. Is that?
Right. Yes.
The
Now, the
building,
town-
the original building was built for 628. We have reconfigured some of our classrooms and so forth. And I understand that the capacity is really based on academic classroom space. So if we have arranged it so we can put 655 into the building.
Well, but my question's not around the configuration so much as you really have two things going on, right? You had towns leaving, which I assume would have made the number of students decrease. Did those towns take their students and put them somewhere else?
Well, a lot of, some of them are paying tuition into the district now.
Correct.
But, as we've shown tonight, that the capability of tuitioning those kids in, I mean, actually, they're going to be paying more per kid when they tuition a kid in than when they were members of the district. I mean, it's kind of a weird double-edged sword, because the towns that pulled out were also the ones that objected to a larger school. So we got a smaller school, they pulled out, and I don't off the top of my head know the breakdown from the towns that pulled out, but they have been tuitioning their kids in, so it's kind of a almost oxymoron, so to speak, that they're paying more for their kids now than they did when they were members, and their ability to send kids of Minuteman is rapidly diminishing.
I see. Does this happen often, that you have towns leave or towns want to join?
Well, I mean, this was, the original district was formed in the 70s, had 16 towns, and, they held together till, I think, 2014, if memory serves me. And, you know, there was a variety of reasons why towns didn't want to participate. And I think it is kind of unusual for towns to pull away out of districts because, you know, they need to find alternatives for the students who want to pursue that kind of education. And, you know, they're really kind of short-sighted in, you know, in my point of view. So, yeah, I think it's kind of unusual for towns to pull out. But I think now that, you know, and it's interesting, some of the towns that are still remaining in the district, like Dover, I think has 1 or 2 kids going. But
So you're saying that the towns that withdrew are still putting students
to
at,
some extent, I mean, they're not getting all the slots because, you know, it's kind of first come, first serve in terms of the member towns. The member towns have to be satisfied first with admissions before there are any slots open to out of district towns. So, you know,
and if I understood you correctly, though, it's a net negative for us that our assessments will go up.
right, because the tuitions, the out of district tuitions are accumulated and they offset our budget to some degree. So, you know, if you can offset the expenses, it'll you know, take down the assessment somewhat. So yeah, there is a linear impact with that.
Absolutely.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks, Kathy. Mary?
Sure, thank you. I've got a quick question. On one of your slides showing your FY23 assumptions, you said that you were going to have a 2.5% increase in, I think it was teacher salaries plus steps and lanes. Did I see that?
2%.
2% plus steps and lanes. Okay, good.
And
If
that's
you
per our
included-
CBA.
I'm sorry,
And that's per our CBA,
what's CBA?
collective bargaining agreement with the teachers.
Great, okay. If you included steps and lanes, could you give us a number for what the total increase would be?
I can. It is, let me just find it. It's roughly $360,000.
What is that as a percent?
Well, let me get the exact number for you then, because so the 2% increase is $173,861 based on our present number of teachers that
Yep.
are going up. The lanes and steps changes is $153,741. I was off. I mixed my numbers up. It's for a total of $327,602.
That's for both.
That's total compensation.
Okay, okay, so that the steps and lanes is a little bit less than the 2% for the collective bargaining. Is that correct? Did I get?
Correct. And the reason why that is that some of these teachers are jumping.
Right,
Not all of them, not everyone is going up.
I understand.
we
So
have
it's
some
a
new
little,
staff
less
started.
than 4% overall.
Correct.
Great, thank you.
Yeah.
Okay, Rich and Stephen, thank you very much. Let me just ask the committee, any other questions? And we don't have members of the public, but we certainly have Stephen and Carrie. Do you guys have any questions? No. Carrie?
I don't have any questions. No.
Okay. Great. Thank you very much, Rich and Stephen. We look forward to getting the fiscal year 23 numbers once the school committee approves them. A couple
Okay.
weeks, it sounds like. Thank you very much. Appreciate
so much.
your time.
Thank you very much. Appreciate your time.
Bye-bye.
I
Good
know.
night now.
Night.
All right, let's turn now to the town presentation. Stephen and Carrie, do you guys want to take it away?
Yes. So Carrie and I are going to co-present this here this evening. And so I think she leads off.
Thank you, Stephen. And thank you, members of the committee. We just wanted to start by taking a moment to go through our timetable so you have an understanding of where we are in the process. So we last presented to you on October 14th, and that's when we responded to your information requests. And at that time, we had really just started our budget process. So just about 10 days before the town manager issued his memo and budget instructions. So we were really at the beginning of the process. We're here before you this evening, and we have just concluded our internal budget hearings just earlier this week. And based upon the information that we obtained through review of each of the budgets, we have a preliminary budget to present to you this evening. I do want to make sure you understand that we are still very much engaged in our budget development process, but we are far enough into it to have a good sense of where we think the total will be. And so at the highest level, I know you all know that our budget really is in two parts. We have the guideline budget, and then we have other accounts, fixed costs that we refer to as non-guidelines. So in fiscal 22, the town's total appropriation, the amount that we ask that goes to town meeting, is about $54 million. So about 55% or so of our budget is guidelines, and the other 45% or so is non-guidelines. So the fiscal 23 guideline that you issued, and then adding in all of the fixed costs, would result in a request for a total appropriation of about $55.5 million. We are here this evening, and we're going to talk through an amount that is higher than that. $56.4 million, and that's about $900,000 above the current guideline. And Stephen will start the discussion about the recommendation.
So when we met with you last time, the guidelines process was refined to focus more on strategic issues as opposed to, a year-over-year percentage. And I think that was a really good choice to try this year. I think it worked out really well for me and how I organized my thoughts. And I think how Carrie and I looked at our approach to what our priorities are. So as we talked about last time, the strategic issues that we identified, that will be impactful to this and future guidelines budgets are compensation and benefits, really getting back on track in terms of being competitive with peer communities. You'll have to, I say take my word for it, but we've had a lot of turnover of late, especially losing really good employees to other communities who may be paying better. And we spent a lot of time working on our compensation plans. And, I think I don't think for this budget, it'll be impactful, but looking ahead, there'll be some work that needs to be done on our health insurance contribution rates because that remains a big issue that we hear. So, and the other thing is not every position that we have is the same, meaning there are positions that we have that are sometimes difficult to fill. And so those have been a particular area of focus. The other one is infrastructure. We did reduce our infrastructure, our capital spending in FY21 and 22 as a result of the revenue losses that we experienced because of the pandemic. And so we feel like we have to go a little extra to regain that ground. As you know, the most expensive type of capital investment you can make is one that has already been deferred. And then that also includes really looking at the efficacy of the 5% policy cap for tier 2. Are we staying with it? Are we staying with the needs that we have? And are we keeping pace with, the aging of our infrastructure? Governance is really just additional resources to support boards and committees. A tremendous amount of staff time is consumed by supporting the over, I think, near 70 maybe boards and committees that we have in Concord. We value the contributions of the many, many volunteers we have, but it is time consuming, and we want to make sure that our teams are adequately resourced to give the boards and committees the support they need so they can support Concord by virtue of their service. And then The last one we really identified for the next 3 to 5 years is a welcoming community, really a focus on affordable housing, access to public transportation, and access to supportive services. So the budget that we're looking at now, based on the requests we received, is looking at about a 6.5% increase. A lot of that is, as you can see, wage adjustments. As I said, we in some key positions, we've really lost our place in the market, and that has really resulted in some attraction and retention issues that need to be addressed. The personnel board took some actions last night, which were a good first step, but there's a lot more work to be done. Utility costs. We have, Dean was talking about CMLP, even though CMLP is a town department, they have to purchase power from the grid to provide it to us, and those costs are going up significantly. Diesel fuel is also going up significantly, and then I'm sure, as you know, solid waste recycling costs have been going up for the last 4 or 5 years, significantly year over year, as the rules change on landfills in the Commonwealth. In fact, most solid waste is now either trucked or trained out of state. And then the 4 strategic issues in the budget that we're looking at, this preliminary budget, there's a focus on infrastructure, on governance, and on welcoming community. The affordable housing component I talked about, the Affordable Housing Trust has now been put together, and they are meeting, and there will be a discussion, I'm sure, here and at the board level about an additional free cash appropriation that would be under the purview of the Affordable Housing Trust to continue to support affordable housing. And then the tier 1 capital, like I said, we were set back for 2 years, and I think we really want to try and make more investment, not only to kind of retake some of the ground we lost, but also in preparation for potentially significant federal infrastructure funding. The tier 1 funding is kind of the materials, equipment, some of those things that enable us to do the work of maintaining our infrastructure. And if we are on the cusp of getting federal investment for that, we want to make sure that we are adequately prepared to do that.
So on this next slide, this is just a recap of the preliminary guidelines. So as you know, your preliminary guideline allows for 2.7% growth, 792,000. That would bring the guidelines budget up to 30,085,000. The preliminary requests that we have before you this evening is a total of 30,990,000, which is an increase or a difference of $905,520.
Barry, let me just interrupt. Can you just go back to the last slide? Let me just explain to folks. The last 2 columns, I've asked Carrie and the schools when they come next week to leave blank. When we issue our final guidelines, we'll fill that in. And if there's a delta, we'll fill that in. So it's pretty clear to everybody at a high level what the differences are. So it's not like Carrie and team didn't complete that. Just wanted to make everybody aware of that. Thanks, Carrie.
Sure. Then on this next slide, I'm hoping not to confuse anybody here. Parashar and I went through this and tried to clean it up and make it a little easier to understand. The point we're trying to make here is that the guidelines budget for the town includes both operating and tier 1 capital. And as Stephen mentioned, there has been a big decrease over the last 2 years in our tier 1 capital. So we wanted to make this abundantly clear where we're asking for additional resources. So in terms of the operating, what we did, or what we chose to do in making this comparison, is to assume that 100% of the tentative guideline is going to the operating budget. And we made this assumption, I think, for the simple fact that our request for salary increase exceeds that. So we're, again, assuming that 100% of the guideline is going towards operating. That leaves a difference of $405,000. Now, I think most of you know that we have a number of interfund transfers. So the town's general fund provides a variety of services to our enterprise funds, and we charge back to them. So they pay for those services. When we started the budget process, we made the assumption that we would have $1.9 million worth of chargebacks. As we stand now with the budget as presented, those chargebacks total $205,000 more than our original estimate. And the single biggest reason why we have this increase is because the town manager has made the decision that beginning in fiscal 23, the recreation revolving fund is going to resume paying for the services that the general fund provides. So you may remember as a result of the pandemic, the recreation revolving fund and the BD enterprise were hit pretty hard. The decision was made to stop those interfund transfers or those chargebacks. Moving into fiscal 23, the recreation revolving fund is now in a position to resume paying for those services. And again, the town manager has decided to reinstate those. So of that 205,000, approximately 130,000 of it represents the charges to the recreation revolving fund. And then the difference is just in spread evenly over, or not evenly, but spread across the other enterprise funds for varying reasons. So that leaves on the operating side a remaining difference of $200,000 that we are seeking some additional consideration. Then moving to the tier 1 capital, the fiscal 22 appropriation is $800,000. We had talked to you back in October about our interest in bringing that up to $2 million, which is where it had been historically before the pandemic. But after reviewing the operating requests and out of consideration for the budget as a whole, we don't feel that we can go from 800,000 to 2 million. We don't feel that that's a reasonable request in a 1-year period. So we're really looking at least a 2-year budget cycle to get back there. That's not to say that we don't have the needs, but that this is what we feel to be the most reasonable thing to do. So that leaves a difference of $500,000. So together, $700,000 is the additional consideration request that we're making this evening. And then Stephen is going to go.
Can you just go back, Carrie, for a minute? I just want to make sure everybody understood how that broke out. Just see if there's any questions on how the 700,000 breaks out.
Yeah,
I have a, go ahead.
Yeah, let's go ahead and raise hands. That way it'd be easier. Brian, go ahead. Sorry.
Yeah, so I just want to clarify this grid with this chart with the previous chart that we just looked at, Carrie, because this makes sense to me, but the ask is 200,000 less, just given the adjusted interfund transfer. So I'm just trying to reconcile, is the ask really 905 or is the ask 700? Because when we try to make our adjustment, are we adjusting for 700 or are we adjusting for 905?
Yeah.
Sure. So the ask is 700,000. We have the revenue offset for the 205,000. And if you can picture the guidelines model in your head, which you probably can't, we do have a column where we make adjustments for additional revenue. And so we would be, when we get to the point where we're looking at the guidelines model, we would be adding in the $205,000 as additional revenue. And so the ask for property tax is 700,000.
Okay, Chris? And then
Thank you.
Amrith,
Yeah, Carrie, I just was trying to understand. So as I listened to you walking through this chart, as you try to break it up between operating and capital, you said that you put all of the money that we provided in the preliminary guideline into the operating column. But there is a number in the capital column. There's an 800,000 there that you're comparing the 1,000,003, which is how you derive the need of 500,000. So if all of the guideline addition is in operating, where does the 800 come from?
So in the fiscal 22 budget, the budget the allocation is 800,000.
Okay, so you're saying if I keep it flat with the prior year.
Correct.
Okay, I got it. Thank you very much.
Amrith?
So, sorry, Carrie, this is probably going to be a very dumb question. I just want to understand this picture. So let me repeat what I think I heard. The first row, the second row says what the guideline numbers were, 29,285,000 and 800,000. What you're actually asking for is on the first row, 29,690,000 and 1.3 million. The two differences are those deltas. So if I add horizontally on the difference row, 905,000 is what you would actually want. However, you found 205,000 somewhere else. Therefore, you're asking for 700,000. That's the consideration you're looking for. Is that correct?
Yes, it is.
Okay, thank you.
And Mary, did you have a question? I heard your voice, but your hand's not raised.
No, actually, Brian asked my question, so I'm good.
Okay, perfect. Thank you, Carrie. Appreciate that.
All set to move forward?
Yep.
So this kind of breaks down the prioritization of the areas where we would be asking for some consideration. That 700,000 that was just referenced on the last slide. Before I do that, though, I do want to note that I think in the budgets that I have prepared so far here, it's always been our goal to meet the guideline, and I think we have thus far. And so I don't, take going over the guideline or asking for additional consideration that lightly. But I remember, I don't know if it was FY21 or 22. I think, Mary, you were the chair, but we talked about how the view of the economic impact of the pandemic as a blip or as a temporary impact. And I think the data bears that out by and large for most of our revenue sources. And so where would we be had that not happened? And in terms of kind of our, sustainable growth rate and our level of expenditure and our normal budgeting and wage growth, where would that be? And so I do think that, and we've done a little bit of analysis of this, but I do think we would probably be higher than we're proposing, even with the additional consideration of 700,000 more beyond the preliminary guideline. I think that now I don't see any reason to try and go. We should be asking for what we think we not only need, but what we think the town needs to meet. To, like I said, regain some of the ground we lost with the lean 2 years we had. So, and like I said, number one is salaries. I've been talking about it for months. We're going to keep talking about it. There's a lot of needs that need to be met. We are going to try and do a classification compensation analysis of the whole organization to make sure that we are market competitive and internally equitable. And then we have some election needs that are, those are obviously non-negotiable, that are kind of above and beyond. As you know, we have been split into two representative districts for the State House. So that adds cost now to our election budget. And then, like I said, we want to be able to provide better support for boards and committees. And so that's a top priority for us there. In our guidelines response, we talked about trying to implement a transportation program, but I think Marcia Rasmussen at DPLM, I think, really rethought that and elected instead to propose a transportation planner position. So somebody full-time dedicated to analyzing and planning transportation in our community. And I support that concept. I support the idea of someone working for the town full time that thinks about transportation. But I do think there's an interface with both Concord Police, which does predominantly enforcement, but also parking and some other transportation, areas, as well as our engineering division of Concord Public Works. So Chief O'Connor, Alan Cathcart, and Marcia and I will be sitting down in the coming weeks to kind of frame out what would that position look like. But I do fully support having a full-time employee that really helps guide our efforts on transportation. And then there's additional overtime for diversity, equity, inclusion training for the police departments. They've done quite a bit of that already. They do a lot of de-escalation training, and they are very, very good at that. But we've said all the way along, the diversity, equity, inclusion, and belonging is a journey, and it's important to stay moving forward on that journey. And so those additional resources will help the police department do that. And then we've had a lot of turnover at our fire department, in some cases due to retirements and things like that. But we have a number of newer firefighters, and so they require an additional training investment, more than someone who's, say, more senior and been through many of especially some of the upfront trainings. So this is why we believe this additional investment beyond the preliminary guideline is important for both the organization and the community. But as Kerry noted, we are still very, very much engaged in this. We are looking for offsets to the greatest extent possible. I'm pleased to report that most departments submitted level service budgets and did not really ask for any additional positions or expansion of services this year. Concord Public Works has been an area of focus because they did get their budget reduced 2 years in a row. And the library, because of the expanded space, is also an area of focus. So those two things we'll be working on as we get the budget ready for the public hearing. I think is that our last slide for this part of it, Carrie?
Yes, it is. Should I stop the share or?
Sure.
Do you have a few more slides, Carrie, or is that it?
No, we had the backup slides.
Okay, great. So let me see if members have questions on what was presented, additional information. I see Mary, Chris, and Dee. Mary?
Thank you, Parashar. I have 3 questions. The first one is around the salary reserve, the 179,000. Is that incremental to FY22? Is that the incremental, or is that the balance? I didn't understand the way it was presented.
I think it's an additional amount.
Okay, so
more than we would typically annually appropriate.
Okay, and that's in anticipation of some adjustments you're going to have to make because you bring salaries more in line with the market.
Yes.
Okay, I understand that, and I think that's a good idea because we've been losing some good people, so that's fine with me. As far as the interfund transfers go, I see that you're going to be charging the recreation revolving. That's really good. But have we ever done any work to look at those transfers to see if they really reflect the market value of the services that either the revolving funds or the enterprise funds are getting from the town?
Yeah, I believe that. I think the formula was set well before my time, but I do think it's based on cost to provide certain services, including finance, accounting, those types of things. But Carrie, you're probably more proficient than I am with that.
Yeah, I remember, Carrie, you and I talked about this a while ago, as far as, maybe it might be time to relook at that formula to see if it really does reflect the market value of what the town is doing for the enterprise funds. Does that ring a bell with you?
Yes, it absolutely does. It's a goal of ours to take a deeper dive into those interfund transfers every year. I would say we have not made as much progress as I would like, but we're definitely making progress. And we do, while we haven't changed most of the formulas, we definitely update to make sure that we're carrying current salaries, current contractual costs. But it's definitely an area that we hope to do more work in the future.
Okay. And then my last question is, the ARPA funds, or whatever they're called, local relief, or whatever the federal funds are that we're expecting, I think it's 5.6 million. Can any of that be used to offset, especially like the tier 1 capital outlay? Is there any way that you can use those funds, or how are you going to use those funds, I guess is the broader question.
So I think there's a number of ways you can use the funds. And I think there's been a number of separate conversations. We are talking about it internally. But I think in terms of, Carrie and I developed a set of priorities that we presented to the select board some months ago. And, excuse me, and our top priority is really broadband. The town is unique in that it operates its own broadband business. And so we have a New Deal style opportunity to use federal funds to invest in the expansion of our broadband network, especially in the business villages, which we discovered were not really, some locations were not adequately served by high-speed internet. We discovered that the hard way during the pandemic. And using the federal funds to make those investments, and then also make repairs to streets, sidewalks, in those areas where we're working in the underground anyway, is really like I said, it's like a new deal where then all of a sudden, we are collecting the revenue from our new customers, but the infrastructure build out was paid for by ARPA. So that's something that I try and keep on top of mind in terms of ARPA funds. It also can offset reduced revenue. We're really targeting the revenue we lost for the parking meters when they were off during when the businesses were subject to pandemic restrictions and capacity limitations. And then of course there are, and there's a lot of different ways you can use them. So theoretically, yes, Mary, you can use them for some of those infrastructure items. But like I said, there's another tranche of money that's coming, and I think we want to get a sense of what that looks like too. But if we didn't operate our own broadband business, I think I would feel very differently about it. But it's just such an amazing opportunity for that.
Okay, thank you.
Chris?
Thank you. Stephen or Carrie, so on the salary or wage gap, and you mentioned that there's a benefits gap as well. What we see this year, would we then expect in FY24 to see more of the same, if not more?
I think it would be probably about the same. About the same, where it's like we talk about like flattening debt service increases. It's the same thing for wages. You want to try and have moderate growth. You want to keep pace, but you don't want to have the overall cost of compensation spike in one given year at the expense of other things. So we want to try and it's probably about 6% in lost wage growth that many employees lost during the 2 years. And I will tell you that those employees worked extraordinarily hard, like everyone did, but they had to find new ways of doing their work and adjust to new technologies and work under very difficult circumstances for much of the pandemic. And so that loss of wage growth really was really affected them. So we want to make sure that we're saying loud and clear, we're committed to, we can't get it all back in 1 year, but to try and get back on the right track.
Okay, thank you. And in terms of general, Carrie, new revenue, so you mentioned that we could have some more charging to our internal business units. What about overall revenue? So one of the big factors in our amount available for guidelines, which could help with this, would be other revenue sources. I don't know if you've done a relook at that at all.
I would say I do think that the revenue projections that we're carrying are still somewhat conservative, but we are still. The big loss for us was in local receipts, was in meals tax and rooms tax. Meals tax is coming back better than rooms tax. And right now we're in a quieter time in terms of tourism in the town, so we're not likely to see any big increases. We're also in a period where the businesses still have an extension on when to pay. I believe that's through the end of the calendar year. And so I'm not sure we're at a point where we're ready to make some adjustments in our revenues, but I do think before we get to town meeting, we will be. And so you typically take a look at guidelines again, you know, in the spring, in March, and I do think we probably will see some positive change to the revenue estimates, but it's a little bit early right now.
Okay, that's helpful. My last question is on, you noted in there that you had some concerns about the 5% cap with respect to tier 2 items. Could you elaborate on that, Carrie?
Sure. Stephen, are you okay?
No, go ahead. Yeah, go ahead.
So our target for the tier 2 spending is up to 5%. And so that is between $5 and $6 million is typically what we're targeting. We are in the process of still reviewing the upcoming 5-year period. And the requests that have been submitted for the next 5-year period are very significant. And they're significant in the public works area. So on an annual basis, we have been spending between $1.5 to $2 million per year on our road maintenance program. And the request and the need is closer to $4 million per year. There, in addition, and we all know this from the Sawmill Brook drainage project that we had to undertake recently, we have some significant need for funding for drainage improvements, for sidewalk improvements, and those types of things. And we really have been expecting to fund that plus roads in the road allocation. So in addition to the $4 million or so need per year for roads, there's about another $1 million plus in those other areas. So public works in and of itself could consume that 5% cap. And I think the next conversation that we need to have after the middle school is what makes sense in terms of a cap for the tier 2 spending. This is all debt financing that's done within the levy limit. So we're not going to be asking for, or wouldn't expect to be asking for debt exclusions for this. But I do think we need some additional consideration on that cap, or we're just not going to be able to maintain our infrastructure in the way that the town is accustomed to.
So those requests would hit, they're going to hit they're part of the tax rate. They're not necessarily part of the guideline, but we'll see them separately in the 5-year capital plan as a request.
That's correct.
And they're funded by taxpayers. Yep. Some of it's funded in cash and some of it's funded in debt, but it's all tax related funded.
Correct.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks, Christy.
Thanks. A couple questions, maybe two, maybe a third one will come up. One of the questions I have is about the transportation planner. Do you know what other towns of our size, 19,000, have transportation planners on their roster and or in service? And can we find out any information from them about some of their work or how it's going or salaries? I'm just concerned that I know Newton has transportation planners and Wellesley probably has transportation planners, but they're much bigger than we are. So I'm just wondering if we need a full-time transportation planner. It's just a question. You might want to go back to Marcia and talk with her about that. Another one is the tier 1 projects. Stephen, do you have a list of the ones that you are thinking about for the 500,000 right now?
Not at my immediate disposal.
Okay. Would we be able to get a list of those that you're thinking about?
We are putting together the capital plan. I don't know if, Carrie, you're intending to put a line, above and below with the 500,000, but we do have a list of requests there. Like I said, we'll present that as a part of the capital plan.
Okay. And my last one is about the ARPA funds. And Mary had started the conversation on this. With the ARPA funds, do you have certain projects in mind at this time?
Yeah. Sorry.
So not beyond generally Dave Wood and his team did kind of a back of the envelope calculation of expanding the network in the business villages. But
Okay.
We have to do some more, just some engineering needs to be done, but no specific projects. And can I go back to your last question for a second?
Sure.
So I think that, it's not there. We have, annually, and you all know this, the requests are greater than the amounts in terms of capital, whether it's tier 1, tier 2, or tier 1 or tier 2. There's always more requested than we can fund. And so the 500,000 is really a level of effort commitment, not an attempt to get certain purchases and certain things done this year. It's more, we need to reestablish the level of effort because we know there's more than 500,000 extra things that need to be done. So I just want to kind of put that amount in perspective. And it's the same thing with ARPA. I think it's making sure that we prioritize and have a level of effort for each, whatever categories the town decides to attack, to address with those funds, that it's, that there's a level of effort that's meaningful.
Okay, good. Then you've answered my questions for now. Thank you.
So Stephen and Carrie, first of all, thank you very much for the presentation. I think it was well organized. I think hit at the right set of topics and points that I think the committee was interested based on your presentation last time. So thank you. I want to continue the ARPA theme for a minute. I know ARPA had a lot of different provisions for support for local education, infrastructure, all that stuff. And I know various departments at the federal level are responsible for developing the guidelines and the rules for how the money gets doled out. How much visibility do we have to those programs and those processes? In other words, are the processes all clear right now? Are they still being developed? And when does the state or others expect sort of, the application process or the guidelines or whatever to be developed and available so that you can answer some of these questions of what we hope to finance and how much?
In terms of guidelines, I think, I'll be honest with you, it's a moving target. You ask certain questions to one agency, you may get a different answer. There are some basics that we know to be self-evident in terms of the way the legislation was crafted, but then there are others that are not as clear. And there is a timeline on these funds. They don't go on forever. And so I think there's that part. But in terms of reimbursement process, I'll defer to Carrie on that because I think she and her team really manage the CARES Act reimbursement. I don't know if the process is going to be similar, but and I do think some of it's going to be reimbursement. Some of it we already have cash in hand from the federal government. Right?
Yep.
That's correct. ARPA is much different than CARES. So CARES, we paid everything out and we went through a very extensive process to submit for reimbursement. ARPA is being paid up front. So the town of Concord, like every other community, has 50% of its ARPA funding in hand right now. And the other 50% will be given out no sooner than a year after we received the first installment. So we do have a sizable amount available and ready to fund projects and purchases as they are approved.
Okay, thank you. Emirath?
Carrie, I was looking at the presentation from the November 4th meeting where we went over the various sources of funds and the proposed tier 1 and 2 and 3 projects and so on. And I didn't find there anything about this 5% cap. Can you say what caps there are now for tier 1, tier 2, and tier 3?
Sure. So this comes from the town's financial policies and procedures document, and I'm happy to circulate that to the committee members after the meeting. The tier 1 projects, the target is 2 to 3% of budget. And when we say budget, it's 2 to 3% of the town spending in total, not just the town organization, but
Okay.
the town as a whole. And then the tier 2 is no more than 5%.
Okay.
So in total, 7 to 8.
But none of the things which you described here, like the roads and things like that, were in that list. What I do see in that list are a list of projects which include public safety complex, CPW salt shed, CPW renovations, Walden Street complex renovations. Are there other lists of projects which maybe we could look at in that general ilk?
Sure. So that we're referring to is the tier 3. Those are the potential debt excluded projects. And there's no cap or target associated with tier 3. And we are now in the process of finalizing the 5-year tier 1, tier 2 plan. It's not yet available, but as soon as it's calculated.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, so the cutoff for tier 2 to tier 3 is 5 million, not 2 million, like I was thinking.
Right, we talked at the last meeting, we talked about it really kind of had been 2 million unofficially. Now
that's okay, thank you.
Thanks, Emirath. Dee?
Yeah, a couple questions on ARPA, of course. Is the broadband project, is that a town project or is that a CMLP project?
That's the same. The CMLP is a town department, whereas in other communities, the municipal light plant is run by an independent district. Under the charter, the town manager is the general manager of the light plant, which then by extension is also, the general manager of the broadband too.
So I thought that broadband fell under the category of the users pay for it, right?
Mm-hmm.
I'm just trying to understand if there's really, public works, the roads are part of the town. I'm just and are serviced by the town. But it seems to me that the CMLP is an enterprise fund. And while it provides services to the people of the town, it is not a town department per se.
It's a town department.
Well,
it is an enterprise fund, but they are all
it's
town
an enterprise
employees.
fund, but it just seems to me it works. If Carrie gets money for providing services to the rec commission or the rec committee, as well as CMLP, they're separate entities. But Carrie, do you get money from the Department of Public Works for providing services?
So we do not charge back to other general fund departments. We only charge back to enterprise and other special funds.
Okay, I'm trying to just better understand this because I think it could have some implications associated with how the ARPA funds are spent. And my other question right now is who approves the ARPA projects?
Well, I think there's aspects to it that don't require an appropriation. So there's aspects of it that the chief executive can approve expenditures under ARPA, but then there are also aspects of it that do require appropriation. So town meeting, I think, and Carrie, I don't know if you view that differently, but the guidance is, like I said, not always clear, but there are certain expenditures that can be made by the chief executive.
You're the chief executive?
The town manager is the chief executive.
Town manager, it's not the select board, it's the town manager?
Under the Concord charter, it is the town manager.
Okay, okay. And then some of them might have to go to town meeting to be expended? Is that what the other part is?
Good.
We're thinking if there's a debt authorization and ARPA is just one source of funding, where we might have a project, maybe a $10 million project, and we were going to use ARPA to fund some of it and enterprise revenue through debt to fund the other.
Okay.
Well, no, I mean, I think even if we use, say, and I'm going to make a number up here, so please don't. This is just for illustrative purposes. This isn't a proposal.
Yep.
All right. So say we spend $2.5 million of ARPA money on wiring our business villages to Concord broadband.
Yeah.
I guess I'm not certain, to be honest with you, how that expenditure can get made, whether it's just through the authorization of the chief executive or if it requires additional approvals.
Okay.
We will obviously figure that out before those proposals get made, but I think that's the big thing. And the other thing is we've been engaged with the board on discussing priorities. I know there's been some talk about what of it could be used potentially towards a middle school project, and so there's a prioritization exercise. When I was asked about ARPA funds, I gave you my opinion that broadband is a really unique opportunity with these funds. That's not necessarily kind of cast in stone that the funds will be used first and foremost for broadband. I was just telling you what my thought was.
Okay, thank you.
Mary.
Actually, I'd like to continue. I think Dee is bringing up a good point that if we use the money for broadband, instead of using it for other things that are allowed, we're not going to be favorably impacting property taxes. In other words, we could use the money to offset expenses that are paid for by property taxes.
Or the stabilization fund for the.
Or stabilization. But the point is that and we might decide that investing in broadband is the right thing to do because it improves our businesses and we want our businesses to thrive. It's just that we need to be clear that we're using this money to invest in an enterprise fund that is supposed to be funded by ratepayers. So I think that's why I think it's complicated, but by choosing to put it in broadband, we're losing the opportunity to use it to offset things that are paid for by property tax. That's all I want to say.
So sure, I appreciate that. You cannot put it in a stabilization fund because you cannot use it to build reserves. And a stabilization fund is a reserve.
No,
so
but
could you?
So, but no, let me finish.
Yeah.
But there's also it's not wide open. There are certain categories that you have to spend it on and certain things that have to be addressed. And one of them it's called the American Recovery Plan Act. And one of those is specifically economic recovery. And so using it to offset just a regular town function, I don't think would meet the threshold for, by how that's defined by the act. It would be.
You mean, for example, streets and roads or pipes?
Yeah.
So maybe I can interrupt here. So I think one thing to recognize is the ARPA Act is actually a composite of a number of different bills. And so you've got bills, subtitles for broadband specifically. You've got other things like Stephen said, that's specifically on economic recovery. There's a whole set of stuff on health infrastructure. And each of those have their own particular rules, timing of when the money has to be spent and how you can get either reimbursed or get direct money from the federal government. And that's what I was referencing earlier. those rules for each of those disparate sections are governed by different federal agencies. And some of them actually flow to the state. And so all of those rules need to become clear before we can sort of go embarking on trying to figure out where to spend the money. So that's why I think some of these questions are a bit too early for Carrie and Steve to answer right now.
And I think the other thing is there's a heavy focus on equity and social justice in what you're using the funds for. And Concord is in the fortunate position of, not really having a lot of eligibility for a lot, to meet a lot of those definitions. And it's, it's a good problem to have, but that does limit our options for it. And that's why in looking at the guidance, I told you what I thought about it, but there are other uses that could be good. I just looking at it as an offset for regular taxation, I don't think is the spirit of the act. But again, there's more conversation to be had.
Amrith?
This is probably the most stupid question of the lot for today. You talked about ARPA for broadband, so you had me thinking of ARPA as in DARPA. This ARPA is something completely different, right? This is America Recover something.
American Recovery Plan Act, yes.
Thank you. When suddenly we started talking about using this on roads, I was wondering why DARPA money was going to roads. Okay, thank you. That makes a whole lot more sense now.
All right, now that we've got DARPA and ARPA cleared up, let me see if there's any other questions before we wrap up and go to the next agenda item. I don't see any hands up. So again, want to thank Carrie and Stephen for pulling this together. Great presentation. I think great overview of kind of the priorities that you've got baked into next year's budget and what we can expect in the following fiscal years. Before we close the meeting out, I think the third item was just to go over the calendar with folks.
Did you go over minutes yet?
Have minutes.
Yeah,
to do.
the minutes,
Yeah.
did we do the minutes?
Oh, I forgot about that. I'll come back to that. How's that? Okay.
I'm going to jump off.
Oh, hold on, Stephen, before you jump off, I do want to thank you for the last 2.5 years of public service to Concord. I know you announced your resignation a couple of weeks last week, but really it's been a pleasure working with you in your capacity. I think I started FinCom a little bit before you got here. It's been nothing but great pleasure having you come on FinCom, answer the questions very patiently. Sometimes we can be exasperating, but you were very, very pleasant about the whole thing. Appreciate your professionalism. And frankly, if you didn't have the answers, you got back to us. So thank you very much. And best of luck in your next stage of your career.
Thank you. Thanks, everybody, and happy holidays.
Happy holidays.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Yeah.
Okay. So let me share the calendar here and then we'll go to the minutes. Very quickly here, share, where's the, of course this happens, I've got it up and it doesn't come up. Okay. Let's try this here.
Are we going to have any committee discussion?
Well, here it is. Let's have that right after this one. So
Okay.
just a quick reminder, we're on the 2nd. Next week is the school presentation, December 9th. Unfortunately, I will not be able to attend, but Chris is going to chair that meeting on my behalf. And then we actually decided to add a meeting on December 15th. So if it's not in your calendar, please add the December 15th meeting where we'll actually pull together the guideline recommendation. This says final guideline recommendation on the 16th. We decided to separate the two meetings. And on the 16th, we're going to have a regular meeting where we'll vote on the final guidelines. And then we also have the hearing on the 16th as well. We'll formally issue the guidelines on the 17th is the upcoming schedule. Does that make sure everybody's got the 15th and the 16th on their calendars? Okay.
So it's 9th, 15th, and 16th. Is that correct?
That is correct. And the 23rd, we have a scheduled finance committee meeting on the 23rd as well. Okay.
And we'll see whether we need the 23rd when we get through to the 16th.
The 16th, we're going to meet after our hearing. We'll close the hearing and then we will meet.
Right.
Yeah,
And that
exactly.
meeting, so the hearing, at the note I sent to you, so the hearing is in person and the FinCom meeting is in person too. So that's going to be, that'll be our first time together. But given the hearing, I wanted to have us in the room if possible. So that doesn't mean we won't go back to Zoom after that, but for that meeting, we're going to be in person.
Is it only in person or is it hybrid?
It is not a hybrid meeting in terms of the public. So it is an in-person FinCom meeting. So the public would only be able to attend if they came to the meeting. But the only topic we're going to discuss is the item that we just spent probably 1 to 2 hours in a hearing room about. So I think that's okay. I don't know whether I can have people attend, committee members attend via Zoom. I'm talking to them about that. I might be able to do it. I don't know.
Is this on the 16th, Chris?
That's the 16th, right?
Okay,
So following the meeting, we would be in person, most likely in the select room where we used to meet, because otherwise we have to set up and wait for the room to clear. And I think it's probably going to be a late night. So I was hoping to us to quickly go into the room, and we'll have at that discussion, we'll have the recommendation, we'll have some sort of a form, a draft of the FinCom report that Lois and Dean are pulling together. So we're going to have to, that's the report that will go to the towns with respect to the middle school. So we'll have a
And
bunch of
that's on the 16th. On the 16th, we'll be in person.
Yep.
And the
Start in the
17th.
it'll start in the hearing room for
17th.
the hearing, and then
The hearing room,
we'll
right,
decamp
right.
to the select board room.
Right.
Is the 17th a meeting, or is that just a date for issuance?
It's the date for
It's
issuance.
the date for issuance, right?
Thank you.
Okay. Eric, did you have a question around the scheduling, or do we want to go back to the discussion?
Well, on the scheduling and on the in-person meeting, I assume this is not an issue, but I thought I'd raise it. Are there any issues around open meeting given folks' hesitance to attend in-person meetings with the COVID situation? Would there be questions about, accessibility or anything?
I doubt it. I mean, again, we have been the item that's under discussion in the FinCom meeting following the hearing is the results of the hearing, right? So I don't believe there's any issue with respect to, you can have an in-person meeting. We can have an in-person meeting. You don't have to have everything on Zoom. So no, I don't think so.
Okay.
Okay.
Could we just get a note on how long are we authorized to have Zoom meetings anyway? Is it go into
Until
February or
April.
March? What's the authorization?
Until April, Dean. It's April.
April.
April
Thank you.
22nd, I believe, is the date that the state lets you have them through.
Okay.
Okay.
That is the current authorization, but that's under discussion for extension right now.
Sure it is.
Okay.
So just to be clear, the hearing is a hybrid
Yes.
meeting. Is that
The
correct?
hearing, all right, so for the public, it's a hybrid meeting. That's absolutely right. And I would suspect a fair amount of people would come either way. I think it'll be a well-attended hearing.
But our meeting is open to the public because it is a meeting.
Yes,
Okay, so there could be people there as well.
absolutely.
Yep,
So
sure.
they'll know that our meeting is right after the hearing. So if they're in the room, they can come.
Okay,
Okay. So let's go back and get people's thoughts. Now, just remember, we only have 1/3 of the budget organizations coming in. We've got the school committees, 2 organizations coming next week. We'll have the 15th to look at everything with a full picture, but I'll share my preliminary thoughts. I think the 700,000 is not unreasonable. I know Carrie and Stephen are working to try to trim that down. As Carrie said earlier, they're still pressure testing all the numbers. But I think the general direction, particularly around the 500,000, as well as the compensation piece, is where I kind of feel that that's probably heading in the right direction. So to the extent if that can come down, let's see how much it can come down to 700. And I'd be inclined to look favorably on giving them a little bit more if possible. So with that, let me just go around the room. I'll just call on everybody. If you don't have any formal thoughts right now, just pass. That might be the quickest way to do this. I'll start up here on the upper left. Eric, you unmuted yourself, so perfect timing. Any
I
thoughts?
unmuted myself to say pass. I'm good.
Okay. Chris?
Yeah, I mean, I think they made a good presentation. We've heard the issue on the roads and the compensation before. I think they're real. So I think their request is very reasonable. It's a question of, again, seeing how it compares when everybody else brings in their number. The discussion about tier 2 is important. So that's, remember, I mean, it's going to come in later in our process, but it has an implication to the taxpayer. So as we think through the guideline, we just need to be cognizant of, what the total increase could be on top of whatever the guideline is. So those are my thoughts.
I think Russia missed almost all of that.
I'm sorry, Dee. I had to go get power cord. Sorry about that.
No, I was just saying that I think that the tier 2 question is one we should consider as we think through. It isn't in connection with the guideline, but it's obviously an impact to the overall taxpayer if those dollars, which I don't doubt, need to come up, and if we need to go beyond the 5%.
Yeah, well, it's interesting because the capital planning process technically is supposed to be only tier 3. But I think Carrie and Stephen said that they would share the list of tier 2 projects with us. So I think that'll be helpful. Right.
They always do, right? So that's something that we
Yeah.
always look at.
Dee?
It's a separate article.
Am I the next
Nothing
person on in your queue? So my only concern really here is adding headcount. And the transportation director sort of sticks out at me. Like we're in a squeezed position at the moment where we're trying to play catch up with capital spending. The roads are in need, and to add headcount at this point to me that's the place where you can take a look at finding some headroom to cut back a little on the request. That's my comment.
Mary?
Actually, I'm wondering, do you want comments on Minuteman as well?
Sure. I guess, the Minuteman stuff, it's sort of a bill presented to us.
Yeah, okay. But I looking forward though, I'm a little bit worried about Minuteman coming in. I mean, they came in last year about 6% over the prior years, and that was at a 2.5% increase in their operating spending. So everything's following the wrong way as far as FY23. So the debt is pretty high. Their operating spending is higher. The enrollments are shifting the wrong way. So I'm a little bit worried about how that's going to work into our guideline model and how that's going to impact our property tax. So that's not looking good to me. As far as the town's budget, yeah, I think it is right for us to let them play catch up on it, but I am concerned about adding headcount. I'm also wondering about some of the training that we're having in the public safety, if that could be something that would be absorbed in they already have budgets for that. So that's another place where I think there's an opportunity. And the tier 2, yeah, we got to look at that. I mean, this year we're going to have an article looking at, I think it will be 5% this year. Carrie, you're not thinking of an increase in FY23 above that, right? Or is
No.
okay.
Not, it would be fiscal, but hopefully for fiscal 24.
Okay, so in FY23, we're gonna be able to look at the articles, but they're gonna be within that 5%. But I hear you, Chris. Going forward, yeah, we got to think hard about that because that hits the property taxes directly. So those are my 3 thoughts. Thank you for asking.
Brian?
I have no comments.
Right?
He's on mute.
You're on mute. You're on mute. You're on mute. There you go.
That was the best of my comments right there. I mean, no, sorry. When they talk about adding a transportation resource, I think that if you hire somebody, you're going to have to fund their project. So I think that'll cause a bump in spending soon afterwards. I mean, you don't want to hire somebody and then say, well, we haven't got any money to spend on what you're recommending. So I think that will cause a bump there. But I think the catch up, I really like the idea that, they did take $1 million out during the pandemic off their budget. And I think, it's appropriate to not hold them to that new lower level because of it. That's it.
Thanks, Ray. Emrith,
Nothing. No comments.
Kathy.
Yeah, I think the salary situation is a problem for everyone on both sides of the equation. I think it's appropriate for the town to focus on being competitive. It raises taxes. Let's hope that the residents of the town are also getting salary increases to help pay for the taxes. I mean, we are in this inflationary pressure, so I don't like seeing expenses go up, but I do understand the need to retain talent. And I guess I share with others, this adding of a person on transportation just might be premature, or we need to find another way to get the benefit of the research that the town was hoping to have this person do in another way. That's it.
Lois?
I don't think I have anything to add to what's been said. I really found the presentations to be very clear and easy to follow, Carrie. Thank you.
What was that on the presentation? Lois?
Excuse me?
What was that on the presentation?
Oh, I just was saying that I really found the presentations to be very well organized and easy to follow, which I really appreciated.
Greg?
Chris, I'm going to ask you this question. Do we have any Minuteman, like we have to accept what Minuteman sort of gives us, right? We don't really have much to do, like pushback, right? Just curious. Mute.
We have an agreement. And so what we do get is a spot on the board. So Steve Ledoux, the fellow who spoke tonight with the guy from Minuteman, he's our rep. So what we get is a vote on the board. That's how you get your representation. And he's also, as he said, the chair of the finance committee. So we have a little bit of weight.
A little bit of,
now.
okay, cool.
But essentially, you're correct. We're, what do we got? 30 students out of 680 or so. That's about the weight that you get, right? But as Mary pointed out, the problem has been that it's an expensive structure, right? So they have a new debt. That's why I was asking about the revenue. They have some pretty high goals for trying to pay for some of the debt and the fields and so forth with revenue. So they're trying to get out from under it. It's an expensive proposition to do both academic and trade, which is what they do. You saw that in the average cost.
Right.
It's 33 grand for Concord. It is tied to our income base. We pay more than a town that has less income. However, it's still $33,000. It's a pretty high price tag, right? For high school. That's what we pay. So it's an expensive proposition.
Okay, thank you. And my comment on the additional headroom is I have no data to suggest other than, yes, it's an increase in cost, but how do we know that this person's not going to come in and look at our transportation and save us $200,000 in cost, right? So me personally, I have no data to support saying yes or no to that position at this point without sort of more of what are they going to do? What are they going to accomplish? Because I've seen in my work environment, we've brought some people in to study some things and they've saved us thousands of dollars on that. So that's my comment there.
Okay.
I think to make a comment on that, Greg, Concord offers very few transportation services. So where we would save money on transportation seems like
well, Dave, we don't have the data, right? We don't know what this person's going to do.
Yeah,
Right?
I guess,
I mean,
yeah, we don't know. And I
we
guess.
don't know. I definitely agree with you that, we don't have that much interest rate, but what is this person going to do for us? Right? We just don't have that data to say yes or no. All we have the data is it's an added salary bump and we don't like it because it's more money. That's the only data I have right now personally.
Okay, all right.
And I understand, and I'm with you, Greg, on that level. I mean, at the end of the day, we're a advisory body sort of at a higher policy level versus getting down and analyzing individual positions. So in any case, let's see what they come back with. As Stephen and Kerry said, they're going to be pressure testing this, and we'll see what they come back with. Let me just ask a general question just to make sure when the schools come in. Was everybody comfortable with the format and the level of discussion and conversation we had?
Yes.
Yes.
And
Okay.
actually, Parsha, I really like the way you've restructured some of the presentations and tying things back into strategic goals. I think that's really helped a lot in terms of getting us to focus on what the real priorities are. Last year, I could feel the process sometimes getting into the weeds, and that's inevitable. It has to happen. But I think we've got to, with this framework in place, I think it's less likely to go that way. So I think that was a good change.
Okay, good. Thank you. And so I've had a conversation with the schools, and they're going to follow a similar format as well. So hopefully it'll be a productive conversation next week. Let's go to the approval of the minutes. Can I get a motion from somebody?
I make a
approve
motion to approve the minutes of the meeting.
February
Let me-
11th, right?
Let me just, February 11th, and it says in the agenda there may be others. Is that the only one we're approving?
I believe so. Carrie, is that correct?
I think that's the one we have.
That's the
That's
only
the
one
only
we
one.
have.
All right, so I'll
Uh,
specifically say it's the minutes for February 11th of the Guidelines Subcommittee as presented in email this afternoon.
Thank you, Emrith. Do I have a second? Do I need a second before I ask for comments or
Yes.
questions? on it?
Second.
Yes.
You do need a
Okay,
second.
there you go. Any comments, discussions, questions, corrections? Was that a yes or a no there?
That was,
That's why I had to open the door so my dogs could get in and out.
Mine just wants the meeting to be over. She's looking for a walk.
That was a motion to adjourn, was that?
My
Motion
dog
to
is making a
adjourn,
motion to
yeah.
adjourn.
Okay, so I need approval of the minutes. Let's quickly go around the room. Eric,
Yes.
Chris,
Yes.
Dee,
Yes.
Yes. Oh,
Dean.
sorry, that was D.
That's
Yes.
okay. Dean,
Yes.
Mary,
Yes.
Brian,
Yes.
Ray,
yes.
Amrith,
Yes,
Kathy,
Yes.
Lois,
Yes.
Greg,
Yes.
Brasher, yes. Okay, we've approved the minutes. I think we've conducted our business for the day. Any other business people want to discuss, or do I get a motion to adjourn?
Motion,
To adjourn.
motion to adjourn.
I heard a
Second.
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 Eric. Eric,
Yes.
Chris,
Yes.
Dee,
Yes.
Dean,
Yes.
Mary,
Yes.
Brian,
Yes.
Ray,
Yes.
Amrith,
yes.
Kathy,
Yes.
Lois,
Yes.
and Greg.
Yes.
Brasher, yes. So moved. Thank you, everybody. Have a good night. Very
Great
productive.
job.
Good meeting.
Great
Thank
job.
you.
Thank you.
Just a hair over 2 hours.
Sorry?
Yeah.
Just
good
a hair over 2 hours.
I
Very
tried.
good.
I tried. See ya.
job.